for Chapter 3 of Gooney Bird Greene. On Friday, Gooney Bird was wearing capri pants, a satin tank top, and a long string of pearls. Her red hair was twisted into one long braid, which was decorated with plastic flowers. There were flip-flops on her feet. "You look beautiful," Kiko said to Gooney Bird in an admiring whisper. "Yes, I know," Gooney Bird replied. "Thank you, Kiko." She walked to the front of the classroom when Mrs. Pigeon told her it was time. Malcolm was in the back of the classroom. He was at his desk writing, "I will never put anything in my nose," 100 times on a piece of lined paper. The school nurse had told him to do it. She said it would keep his hands busy. "How come Gooney Bird gets to go to the front of the class?" Malcolm asked. "Shh," everybody except Felicia Ann said to Malcolm. "Listen." "Today," Gooney Bird said, "I have a very exciting story to tell you. In my story, there's a long journey, a mystery, and a rescue." Mrs. Pigeon, seated at her desk, had begun correcting some spelling papers. She looked up. "Second graders," she said, "hear the different things that Gooney Bird is putting into her story. That is what good storytellers do." Gooney Bird listened patiently to the teacher. Then she stood up straight and did some breathing exercises. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked at the class. "I'm ready to begin. The title of the story for today will be How Gooney Bird Came from China on a Flying Carpet." "Just like Aladdin," Barry Tuckerman said in a loud whisper. "Barry, please pay attention," Gooney Bird said. "I like to have absolutely all the eyes on me." Then, when the class became silent, all except Felicia Ann, who had been silent all along, and almost all the eyes, even Mrs. Pigeon's, were on her, she began. How Gooney Bird Came from China on a Flying Carpet. Once upon a time, just last month, Mr. and Mrs. Greene decided to take their little girl, Gooney Bird Greene, and move away from the place where they had always lived. They had always lived in China, but now Mr. Greene had a new job, and his new job was in Water Tower. "That's here," said Chelsea. I live in Water Tower." Gooney Bird stopped talking. She rearranged her pearl necklace so it draped over one shoulder. "Me too," said Tricia. "We all live in Water Tower," Ben pointed out. "That's why we all go to Water Tower Elementary School." "Class," Mrs. Pigeon warned. "Mrs. Pigeon," Gooney Bird said politely, "let me take care of this." "Children," she said in a firm voice, "I cannot tell a story if I am constantly interrupted. There will be time for questions and comments. Please raise your hand if you want to say something. It's very distracting for me if you call out." "Sorry," Tricia said. "Sorry," Chelsea said. "Sorry," Ben added. The class waited. Gooney Bird looked around at all of them sternly. Then she did some breathing exercises. And began. They had always lived in China, but now Mr. Greene had a new job, and his new job was in Water Tower. So they packed carefully. It took many days. First, Mr. Greene had to pack 43 sets of false teeth. Then Mrs. Greene had to pack dancing shoes and her bathing suits. And Gooney Bird had to pack all her belongings, which included a money collection. Finally, their furniture was loaded into a moving van, and the Greene family waved goodbye as the moving van drove away from China and started its journey to Water Tower. Gooney Bird stopped. Every child in the classroom had a hand raised, and even Mrs. Pigeon was waving her arm. "I'll have an intermission now for questions," Gooney Bird said. "Chelsea, you're first." "Why did Mr. Greene have 43 pairs of false teeth?" Chelsea asked. "Well, the false teeth are not part of this story," Gooney Bird said. "Malcolm?" Malcolm looked up from his "I will not put anything in my nose" paper. His eyes were very wide. "Tell me about the money collection," he said. "That's another story," Gooney Bird said. "Beanie, when are you going to tell about the prince and the diamonds?" Beanie asked. Gooney Bird thought it over. "On Monday, I'll tell it," she said. "Now, there's time for one more question before I begin. Mrs. Pigeon, did you have your hand raised?" Mrs. Pigeon nodded. "Gooney Bird," she said in a nice voice, "you have an amazing imagination, and we think you are wonderful at telling stories, don't we, class?" She looked around, and almost all of the children nodded. "But I want to be certain that the children understand that these are made-up stories. So I want to point out, my stories are absolutely true," Gooney Bird said. "I want to point out," Mrs. Pigeon went on, "that of course we all know that China is a foreign country across the ocean, and that a moving van could never drive from China to Water Tower." Gooney Bird rearranged her pearls and sighed. "Mrs. Pigeon, why don't we take a few minutes for some research? Is there an atlas in that bookcase over there?" Mrs. Pigeon laughed. "Of course." She went to the bookcase and took out a book of maps called an atlas. "Now, would you find out if there are other Chinas?" "Other Chinas? I don't think." Mrs. Pigeon turned to the pages of the atlas called the index at the back. "Oh, my goodness," Mrs. Pigeon said after a minute. There's a China in Texas." "Correct," said Gooney Bird. "And what else?" "There's a China in Maine." "Correct," said Gooney Bird. "And California. There's a China Lake. Oh my goodness, look, in North Carolina." "And now it's time to continue my story," Gooney Bird announced. "Now, where were we?